I stood by the well as the sun bled out across the sky, the last light turning the fields of Doi Lua Sham into long shadows of gold and ash. My name is Darian Vale, 29 years old, alone. The farm had been my parents' before it became mine, and I kept it because letting it go felt like burying them a second time. Every day was the same. Feed the chickens, water the barley, haul the vegetables to market, eat supper by myself at the scarred wooden table, then lie awake in a house that had too many rooms for one man. The rope creaked in my hands as I pulled up the bucket. That was when I heard it. A soft scraping at the gate, like someone too tired to knock properly. I set the bucket down and walked over. She was there, an orc woman, tall and broad-shouldered even in exhaustion, gripping the wooden fence as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her dark cloak hung in rags caked with dust and mud. Black hair clung to her face in damp strands. Her eyes, golden, like old coin, were swollen and red, but she wasn't crying. She simply looked at me the way a person looks when every door has already slammed shut. I didn't speak first. I just waited. She swallowed once, then said it, voice low but steady, each word carved from something raw. I have nowhere else to go. The sentence landed between us like a stone. It wasn't begging. It wasn't a performance. It was the plain truth of someone who had run out of roads. I saw it in her face then, the last scraps of pride, the bone-deep weariness, and the quiet terror that I would close the gate the way everyone else had. My hand moved. Before my mind finished arguing with itself, I lifted the latch. Come in. She hesitated, glancing back down the empty road as if expecting pursuit. Then she stepped through. Her boots left heavy prints in the dirt. Up close, she was even taller than I had thought, easily a head above me, but right now she looked small, the way anyone looks when they're holding themselves together with nothing but will. I led her inside the house. The fire was low, but the embers still glowed. I poured her a cup of water from the jug on the table and set it in front of her. Then I ladled out the last of the root vegetable soup I had made that afternoon, still warm. She wrapped both hands around the bowl like it might vanish if she let go. She drank slowly, carefully, as though even spilling a drop could get her thrown out again. When her breathing evened, she began to speak. Her name was Vera. She had worked at the Green Lantern Tavern in Harrowmere. The son of a wealthy merchant, Lorik Fenn, had cornered her more than once, demanding she go with him. She refused every time. A few days later, the tavern's strongbox was found empty. No one asked for her side of the story. The owner fired her on the spot. The boarding house mistress tossed her belongings into the street the same afternoon. By nightfall, the whole town knew the story. Orc thief. Doors that had once opened for her now stayed bolted. No one would hire her. No one would shelter her. She told it all without self-pity, just flat facts, the way someone recites a sentence they have already repeated too many times in their own head. I listened. The house creaked around us, the familiar sound of old wood settling for the night. When she finished, I looked past her toward the hallway. The last room at the end had stood empty for 4 years. My mother's sewing things were still in the drawers. My father's spare boots still sat by the door. I had never had the heart to clear it out. I met her eyes again. Would you like to move in here with me? She jerked her head up, startled. I kept my voice calm. It's not charity. I need help on the farm, cooking, keeping the ledgers, tending the chickens, watching the stores. You'd have your own room, wages, and meals. No debts between us. You work, you stay. That's all. Vera stared at me for a long time, searching my face for the trick she expected to find. There wasn't one. I meant every word. I showed her the room. A simple wooden bed, a small wardrobe, a window looking out over the barley fields. The latch on the inside of the door was sturdy. She touched it with 2 fingers, almost reverently. Can I lock it? She asked. It's your room, I said. You can lock it, open it, or nail it shut if you want. It's yours now. She turned away quickly, but I still caught the shine of tears she refused to let fall. I left her there and went back to the main room. I banked the fire, washed the bowl she had emptied, and tried to pretend my hands weren't shaking. For years, the only sounds at night had been the wind in the eaves and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Tonight I heard soft footsteps at the far end of the hall, the quiet click of a latch being drawn, and then nothing. But it wasn't the old nothing. It wasn't emptiness. It was the sound of someone else breathing under the same roof. I sat at the table a long while, listening to that small, careful sound. For the first time in 4 years, the house didn't feel too big. It felt like it was remembering how to be a home. Outside, the last of the sunset faded, and the stars came out over the barley. Inside, a tired orc woman slept behind a locked door she had chosen for herself. Felt the long quiet around me shift, just a little, into something warmer. Something that might someday sound like belonging. The next morning I woke to the smell of wood smoke and something baking. I lay there a moment, staring at the ceiling beams, wondering if I had dreamed the entire evening. Then I heard the soft clatter of a spoon against a pot and knew I had not. I pulled on my shirt and walked into the kitchen. Vera was already there. The fire was crackling, the table had been wiped clean, the water jug was full, and my ledger from yesterday sat neatly stacked beside a fresh pot of porridge. She moved quietly, the way someone does when they are trying not to take up space. When she saw me, she straightened, hands folding in front of her apron as if waiting for judgment. "You didn't have to start before dawn," I said. She kept her eyes on the floor. "I took the job. I have to prove I'm worth keeping." The words landed like a small stone in my chest. I wanted to tell her she didn't need to earn the right to breathe, but I knew words like that would only make her more uneasy. So I simply sat down and let her serve me. She was better than I expected. In 2 days, she had reorganized the entire pantry. On the third morning, she showed me the ledger and pointed out 3 things I had been doing wrong for years. I was selling eggs too cheap at market, buying salt from the wrong trader, and storing the barley too close to the north wall where damp crept in. She didn't boast. She simply slid the corrected numbers across the table and waited. I stared at the neat handwriting and felt something loosen inside me that had been tight for a long time. The farm began to run smoother. The chickens laid more. The barley looked taller. Even the old well pump stopped squeaking after she oiled it without being asked. But fear still lived in her like a second shadow. Every time a horse passed on the road, she froze mid-step. When I walked into the kitchen too quickly, she took half a pace back. She apologized for dropping a spoon, for using an extra piece of kindling, for asking to borrow a needle and thread. Each sorry sounded like she expected me to change my mind and send her away. I started leaving small notes around the house. I wrote them on scraps of brown paper and tucked them where she would find them. "Use whatever you need. No one is keeping count. This room is yours for as long as you want it." She never mentioned the notes, but I noticed she stopped apologizing quite so often. The house itself began to change. My meals had always been bread and thin soup. Now there were hot barley cakes, stew thick with root vegetables, and bundles of wild herbs drying above the hearth. She found my mother's old pottery jug in the cupboard and filled it with meadow flowers. The scent of them mixed with wood smoke and made the rooms feel lived in again. Memories of my parents no longer cut. They simply sat beside me, quieter now, almost gentle. We began to talk. At first it was only small things. How many eggs the speckled hen had laid, whether the irrigation ditch needed clearing, how the price of salt had risen again. Then one evening, she sat on the porch steps with her knees drawn up, staring out at the barley. The sun was going down, and the fields looked like they were on fire. She spoke without looking at me. "My mother died when I was small. My father drank until he forgot he had a daughter, then he left. I learned to be quiet. I thought if I worked hard enough and stayed out of the way, no one would have reason to hurt me." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Turns out silence doesn't protect anyone when someone wants to blame you for their own greed." I told her about the winter my father coughed blood for 3 months, and my mother sat beside him until she caught the same sickness. I told her how the house felt like a tomb for years afterward. She listened the way few people do, like every word mattered. After a week, she announced she would walk into town alone to buy salt and cloth. I offered to go with her. She shook her head. If I hide forever, they win. When she returned that afternoon, she was quieter than usual. She put the parcels away without speaking. Only after supper, when the fire had burned low, did she tell me. "They still call me thief. Some of them said it loud enough for me to hear. I felt anger rise so fast my hands clenched around my cup. She saw it and laid her fingers lightly on my wrist. "Don't fight them for me. I don't want to drag you down into the same mud they threw me in." That night the rain came hard. I woke to a sound so soft I almost missed it. Someone crying in the kitchen. I didn't go in. I simply added another log to the fire, set a cup of hot tea on the little table by the door, and knocked once, very gently. Then I went back to bed. In the morning she looked at me across the table and said, "Thank you." She didn't explain what for. She didn't need to. Winter crept closer. The air grew sharp. Vera stopped living like a guest who might be asked to leave at any moment. She hung her cloak on the peg by the door beside mine. She began to call the room at the end of the hall my room. When I came back from the market in the late afternoons, I found myself walking faster, listening for the sound of her moving inside the house, for the low hum of a song she sometimes sang while kneading dough. For the first time in years, the farm didn't feel like a place I was merely keeping alive. It felt like a place that was waking up. And every evening, when the light turned the barley gold and the wind carried the smell of wood smoke across the fields, I caught myself smiling at nothing in particular, because somewhere inside my too quiet house, an orc woman who once had nowhere to go was making supper, and the silence I had lived with for so long finally had company. The afternoon was cold and gray, the kind of cold that settled in your bones and refused to leave. I was behind the house, splitting firewood, axe rising and falling in steady rhythm, when I heard the crunch of carriage wheels on the frozen path. I paused, sweat cooling on my neck, and looked toward the gate. A fine black carriage rolled to a stop. The door swung open and Lorik Fenn stepped down. He wore a heavy fur-trimmed cloak, silver rings flashing on every finger, and the same oily smile I had seen once or twice in town. Behind him, the driver sat motionless, eyes fixed straight ahead. Through the kitchen window, I caught a flash of movement. Vera. 1 second she was stirring the pot, the next she had gone perfectly still, face draining of color. She backed away from the glass like the devil himself had appeared. I set the axe in the chopping block and walked out to the gate. Lorik leaned against the fence as though the whole farm already belonged to him. "Darien Vale," he said, voice smooth as polished stone. "I hear you've taken in a thief." I stopped a few paces away, arms loose at my sides. "I've hired a good worker, better than any the Fenn name ever sent to market." His smile thinned. "She stole from the Green Lantern. Everyone knows it, and now you're sheltering her. Word travels, farmer. The merchants won't buy your barley. The miller will raise his price. The whole town will turn its back. Keep her, and you'll lose everything you have left of your parents." I felt the old anger rise, hot and sudden, but I kept my voice even. "She didn't steal anything, and if the town wants to starve itself to punish me, that's their choice, not mine." Lorik studied me for a long moment, then laughed softly. "Brave words. Stupid ones, too. You'll learn." He climbed back into the carriage without another glance. The wheels turned and the carriage rolled away down the road. I stood there until the sound faded, then walked inside. Vera was in her room. She had pulled out the small sack she arrived with and was folding her few clothes into it with shaking hands. When she heard my footsteps, she didn't look up. "I can't let you lose the farm because of me," she said, her voice cracked. "I'll go tonight, before it gets worse." I crossed the room in 3 strides and took the sack from her hands. She tried to hold on, but I was stronger and gentler than she expected. I set the bag on the bed and turned her to face me. "Listen to me," I said. "I'm not keeping you here out of pity. I'm keeping you because this house was dying before you came. The fields feel alive again. The table isn't empty anymore. You're not a burden, Vera. You're the reason I want to wake up in the morning." She stared at me, golden eyes wide and wet. Something inside her broke open. A sob tore out of her chest, the first sound I had ever heard her make that wasn't careful or controlled. She stepped forward and I caught her. Her arms went around my neck like she was drowning and I was the only solid thing left in the world. I held her while she cried, one hand stroking her dark hair, the other pressed against her back. When the worst of it passed, she lifted her face. Our eyes met. I didn't plan it. I simply leaned down and kissed her, soft, asking nothing more than a question. She answered. Her lips were warm and trembling, but they answered. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind outside and the beating of two hearts that had finally found the same rhythm. After that, everything between us changed, quietly and completely. The days that followed proved Lorik right about one thing. The pressure came fast. The miller refused to grind our barley. Buyers at market offered half the usual price for my vegetables and sometimes none at all. A few people crossed the road when they saw Vera walking beside me. She kept her head high, but I saw the way her shoulders tightened every time. I never left her side at market, not to show her off, to show them I was not ashamed. Then 4 days after Lorik's visit, an old woman named Mara came to the farm. She had worked as a washer at the Green Lantern for 20 years. In her arms she carried a small wooden box. Vera froze when she saw her, but Mara only smiled sadly. "I found this," the old woman said, opening the box. Inside lay the missing money pouch from the tavern. "It was in the back of Lorik Fenn's carriage the morning after the theft. I kept quiet because I was scared. But I saw what he did to you, girl. And I saw what he did to another girl before you, Elna, from the weaving house. She's here with me. She'll speak too." A second woman stepped forward, thin, nervous, but determined. She told us how Lorik had cornered her the same way, how she had refused him, and how he had accused her of stealing thread and ruined her name. The stories matched perfectly. Vera sank onto the bench by the hearth. She covered her mouth with both hands as tears spilled down her cheeks, not the broken sobs of the other night, but tears of pure relief. "So I'm not crazy," she whispered. "I really didn't do anything wrong." I knelt in front of her and took her hands. "I knew it from the first day. Now the rest of the town is going to know it too." Mira nodded. "I'll stand before the magistrate, so will Elna. It's time that boy answered for what he's done." That night, we sat together on the porch long after the fire had burned low. Vera leaned against my shoulder, her fingers laced through mine. The barley fields lay silver under the moon. "Tomorrow," I said quietly, "we're not going to market." She lifted her head. "Where are we going?" I squeezed her hand. "We're going to get your name back." For the first time since she had stood at my gate with nothing left, Vera smiled, a small, fierce, hopeful thing that made the cold night feel almost warm. And in that moment I understood something I had never known before. I hadn't just given her a room and a job. I had given her a future. And she, without meaning to, had given me one right back. The magistrate's house stood in the heart of Harrowmere, a solid stone building with tall windows and a heavy oak door that had seen more truths and lies than most men ever would. When Vera and I stepped inside, every head in the crowded antechamber turned. Whispers rippled through the room like wind through dry barley. "The thief is back. Darien Vale has lost his mind. An orc in the magistrate's hall. Has the world gone mad?" Vera's fingers tightened around mine. I squeezed back, steady and sure. We had walked through worse stairs at the market. We would walk through this too. Mira was already waiting near the front bench, the small wooden box resting in her lap. Beside her sat Elna, pale but straight-backed. When the magistrate, a stern man named Harlan with iron-gray hair and a voice like gravel, called the hearing to order, Mira stood first. She placed the box on the table with deliberate care and opened it. The missing money pouch lay inside, still tied with the Green Lantern's faded ribbon. "I worked in that tavern for 20 years, Mira said, voice clear and unafraid. "I saw Lorik Fenn corner Vera night after night. I saw her refuse him every time. The day the strongbox was emptied, he was the last person in the back room. 2 days later, I found this pouch under the seat of his carriage while I was helping load supplies. I kept silent because I was scared. But I will not be silent anymore. That girl never stole a copper." Then Elna spoke. Her voice trembled at first, then grew stronger. She told how Lorik had done the same to her, pressed her, been refused, and ruined her name with a false theft accusation at the weaving house. The details matched Vera's story exactly. 2 separate lives, same pattern. The magistrate's face hardened. Lorik Fenn was summoned. He strode in with the same fur-trimmed cloak and arrogant smile, but the smile faltered when he saw the open box and Elna sitting there. His eyes flicked to Vera, then to me, and something ugly flashed across his face. "She's an orc," he sneered. "A lying servant who—" Vera stepped forward before I could move. Her hand slipped from mine, but her voice did not shake. "I do not need anyone to speak for me." She looked straight at Lorik, golden eyes steady. "You could not break me when you tried. You cannot break me now." I said no. That was all I ever did. The room fell quiet enough to hear the wind outside. Lorik opened his mouth, closed it, and for the first time looked like a man who realized the ground beneath him was no longer solid. Magistrate Harlan ordered the box sealed as evidence and issued warrants to search Lorik's carriage and the Fen warehouses. Within the hour, men returned with more. False ledgers, stolen goods from other shops, and letters Lorik had written threatening 2 more girls who had refused him. The weight of it settled over the room like snow. The town's mood shifted in the space of a single afternoon. The owner of the Green Lantern arrived at the farm that same evening, hat in hand, and pressed a small bag of coins into Vera's palm, back wages, and an apology that sounded rehearsed, but was better than nothing. Vera accepted the money with quiet dignity. "I will not return to work for you," she said simply. "Some doors should stay closed." The next morning we walked through the market together. Heads still turned, but fewer now. Some people looked away in shame. A few stepped forward and muttered awkward sorries. Vera did not gloat. She did not curse them. She simply kept walking beside me, shoulders back, chin high, taking back every step that had once been stolen from her. By the time we left the square, the whispers had changed. They no longer called her thief. They called her by name. We rode home as the sun dipped low, painting the barley fields in strokes of gold and rose. Vera was quiet for most of the journey, but when the roof of our house came into view, she let out a long, shaky breath. "I thought everything ended the day they threw me out," she said. I reached over and took her hand. "No," I told her. "That was the day you came home." She leaned her head against my shoulder as the wagon rolled through the gate. The house waited for us. Smoke curling from the chimney, the chickens fussing in their pen, the fields stretching wide and green under the evening sky. It no longer looked like a place we were simply borrowing. It looked like the beginning of everything we would build together. And for the first time since the day she had stood exhausted at my gate with nowhere left to go, Vera smiled like a woman who finally believed the future belonged to her. The weeks after the hearing passed in a strange new quiet. The town didn't change its heart in a single day, but the sharp edges of suspicion had dulled. Some doors still closed when we passed, some eyes still slid away, yet Vera no longer bowed her head. She walked beside me through the market with her chin high, and when people muttered, she simply kept walking. The weight she had carried for so long was finally lifting. One evening, as the sun painted the barley fields gold, she sat on the porch steps with her knees drawn up and spoke of a dream she had never dared voice before. "I want to open a small stall right here at the gate," she said. "Barley cakes warm from the oven, apple tarts with honey from our own hives, thick root soup for travelers. Nothing fancy. Just good food made by someone who knows what it feels like to have nothing." I looked at the empty stretch of road beside our gate and smiled. "Then let's build it." The next morning we dragged old planks and beams from the back of the barn. I held the nails while she measured. She painted the sign herself in careful letters, "Little Gray Hill Hearth." By the 3rd day, the stall stood sturdy and proud. Its roof sloped just enough to shed rain, its counter wide enough for 2 people to work side by side. Vera stepped back, wiped flour from her cheek, and for the first time I saw pure joy in her golden eyes. The morning we opened, her hands trembled as she arranged the first tray of barley cakes. I stood beside her without crowding, close enough that she could feel I was there. By midday, the trays were nearly empty. People came out of curiosity, an orc selling bread at the edge of town, but they returned because the food was honest and warm. A traveler bought 6 cakes for his journey. A farmer's wife asked for the soup recipe. By dusk, Vera's cheeks were flushed, not from fear, but from the simple pleasure of work that was hers. The farm began to breathe again. Money accumulated in the tin box on the mantel. We hired 2 men to help with the harvest. The roof no longer leaked. The chicken coop grew larger. But the real change was inside the house. Laughter lived there now. Vera sang while she kneaded dough. I caught myself whistling when I came in from the fields. Evenings were no longer silent meals at opposite ends of the table. They were conversations that stretched long after the candles burned low. One twilight, when the barley glowed like molten copper, I took her hand on the porch and spoke the words that had been growing in me for months. "I love you, Vera." She didn't startle. She simply let out a long breath, as though she had been holding the answer inside her chest since the night she first stepped through my gate. "I love you too," she said. "I think I started loving you the moment you opened the gate and didn't ask for anything in return." Spring arrived with soft rains and the scent of new growth. On a clear evening, I led her to the porch where the first wildflowers had pushed through the grass. I took a small silver ring from my pocket, simple, etched with stalks of barley and tiny meadow blooms, and knelt before her. "The day you came here, you told me you had nowhere left to go," I said. "Now I'm asking you something different. Will you stay with me forever? Will you let this farm, this house, this life become ours together?" Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." We held a small wedding in the barley field behind the house. Mara and Elna stood with Vera, their faces bright with pride. A handful of others came too, people who had once looked away but now chose to stand beside us. Vera wore a simple dress the color of cream, her dark hair braided with wildflowers. When she walked toward me across the green, I didn't see the exhausted woman who had once gripped my fence to stay upright. I saw the woman who had chosen to stay, to fight, to build. We spoke our vows under the open sky while the wind moved through the barley like a blessing. No grand feast, no expensive gifts, just honest promises and the knowledge that we had already walked through fire together and come out stronger. Afterward, life settled into its new rhythm. Vera still ran the stall, her laughter carrying across the road each morning. I still worked the fields, but now I came home to someone who met me at the door with flour on her apron and love in her eyes. We talked of the future in quiet evenings, planting an orchard of apple trees, building a larger oven, taking in others who had nowhere to go the way Vera once had none. "There are so many like me," she said one night, curled against my side. People the town turned away. If we have room, we should make room." I kissed the top of her head. "Then we'll build it wide enough." Sometimes late at night, I still remember the evening she stood at my gate, exhausted and proud, saying she had nowhere left to go. I had thought I was only offering her a room and honest work. Instead, she gave me back a life I hadn't realized I had lost. A house filled with warmth, a farm that felt alive, and a future I wanted to wake up to every single day. If anyone ever asks me when my real life began, I will tell them the truth. It began the day a tired orc woman stepped through my gate, and I was wise enough not to let her walk away alone.